Hello, hello. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sheryl Patton-Dandridge. I am the founder of Another Woman's Story, and we are an organization designed to assist ladies that have been through domestic violence situations and are survivors. Our goal is to help those who have been in a situation, to help those who have come out of the situation to lead a better life through conversation, through podcasts, eventually through face to face meetings. And eventually, after that, we plan to assist with housing. So, tonight is going to be a different night. Tonight, I'm going to share my own story. Many of you have heard pieces of it. And one of my best friends asked that I share the whole thing. So, we're going to go through some pieces of my life that are things that I'd like to forget, but certainly know how important it is to share so that other people can receive the help that they need, get some questions answered. If any of you if you would just share this on your Facebook pages, on your pages, so that the word can get out. We are open with regard to answering questions. Anything that you guys want to ask me, those of you who know me, if you want to ask questions, things you didn't find the answers to, hopefully we'll touch on a lot of information tonight. So bring your tissue. I don't expect to cry, but there might be places where I'm a little emotional. This is really personal for me. And so we're just going to let it roll however it rolls. So tonight I have a special guest with me, one of my best friends, Sheryl Jackson. She was with me when it was time to make that change, and certainly has been there for me before and after. She probably will ask some questions that most people will not, and she probably has a lot more history than most of you do. So with that, I'd like to bring her on. Hello, Miss Sheryl.
Hey, lady, you're looking beautiful tonight.
Thank you too.
I'm
You
feeling like
too.
I need to raise up in my chair because you're
Raise
all
up,
up high
girl.
and I'm all down low. And,
Raise up.
you got
So,
to get all ready. It's just
so this is going to
okay.
be an interesting thing because, first of all, um, welcome. Thank you for coming on tonight.
Well,
And it
thank you
looks
for
like I
having
didn't
me.
plug up my laptop. So before I lose everything and everybody,
This is
let
why
me
you know it's live because when it's live, you just bloopers. It's a blooper.
these are bloopers. When they're live, they can't be bloopers. Um so Sheryl, um, why don't you start talking just a little bit?
Why don't
Let
I
me
kill
let me
time and
plug in my
space
laptop.
before we lose
Let me
a
plug
little
in my
audience
laptop
that we
before we
have?
lose each other. Yes, go
So,
ahead.
so first of all, I'm just really grateful that Cheryl asked me to join her, to rejoin her. In her last talk, she talked about her squad. And if you didn't have an opportunity to see that, I encourage you to go back through her feed and take a look at um, that podcast. It was absolutely amazing. And she really talked about the role that each of the members of her squad played in her journey to survival. And it really helps me to really think about what a squad truly is and being grateful to be a part of her squad. And as a result of that, we were really just chatting about the various phases that she had to go through during the abuse, the choice to leave the abuse, after the abuse, additional abuse, post the abuse, and then finally her journey to freedom. And now utilizing what she's been through in order to help and change the lives of others. And so that's going to be the exploration this
Ooh,
evening that we're going to go through.
okay,
And I guess we'll just go ahead and get this party started.
let's go. So, I don't know where to begin. First, I will talk about just how I came to get into the situation that I was in. A lot of times people want to know how everything started. And one of the myths that I can get rid of right now is that the situation, anytime you're in a domestic violence situation, does not start with physical right away. So
Right.
it starts with different things that happen. For example, I really like when you wear your hair that way. I really like when you wear yellow, or why don't you consider doing this? Or why don't you, there's subtle suggestions. Um, and I don't really know if the perpetrator, and I'll call them the perpetrator, I don't know if they're trying to establish control or if they're trying to see how far you will let them go. And I guess
Mhm.
everybody's limit is different. Everybody's response to that is different. What I will say, looking back, is if it makes you feel uncomfortable, then you need to check that. Because
So let
some
me
people,
ask you.
yeah,
No, go ahead. I'm sorry, Cheryl.
I was going to say, because some people don't have a problem with somebody saying, this is a suggestion, or some people don't have an issue. I just feel like everybody's response to suggestion, response to relationship, response to things that are uncomfortable is different. Everybody's level of that is different. And your body, to me, your body and your being kind of knows when you're uncomfortable.
So let me ask you a clarifying question to that. Do you can when you think back to just the beginning stages, was there some slight discomfort within your own inner being, soul, mind, or heart where certain things took place where you might have wanted to do one thing and the person said, well, I prefer that you do this, or you might have wanted to wear your hair that way and somebody said, I prefer that you wear it that way, or you might have wanted to go somewhere and they were like, no, I prefer you not go. I'm not suggesting that those were the specific scenarios, but what I am asking is, in the early stages when you do a look back, did you find yourself talking yourself into agreeing to do certain things that made you feel uncomfortable, even if they were things that weren't necessarily harmful, but the exchange caused you a little bit of discomfort when you really think back?
No, I honestly can say, in my situation, there was nothing that I felt uncomfortable about until the day I got married. There was not anything that made me feel like I'm doing this against my will. I'm doing this because I feel pressure. I did not
Mm-hmm.
feel any of those things. Now, what I will say is there were some things that I probably could have checked. So, for example, there was a history of abuse in his family, his father with his mom. So perhaps that could have been a red flag because I was not well versed enough in terms of what abuse even looks like. And my experience was not anything that was connected to the marriage. I can't really say that I paid attention to that. I just thought that's sad that his father was that way. I didn't even equate that to mean that this was going to be my story. And one of the things that we grew up and our parents used to say, if he really loves his mom, pay attention to that. You want a man that really loves his mom, and he really loved his mom, in my opinion. So that wasn't a red flag. So there was not anything. I didn't see anything literally that made me kind of question um, until the day we got married. And the day we
So I
got married,
appreciate you. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that because I think so often people feel like there should be some sign. And so the point that you're making in that there really isn't always a sign until it
there's a
shows up.
sign.
And so when you say the day you got married, and then obviously you ended up staying married for a period of time and having children. So can you share, going back to that original question, until it does happen, what that felt like or looked like for you, especially if you had that initial feeling before it was physical?
So my uh first thought where it was like was the day we got married, and we went out to dinner, and when we got home he said, now you're my wife. And it was the way that he said it that the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It was the way that he said it that I felt like instantly I felt like this was a mistake. Instantly I felt that. And I wasn't thinking what do I need to do. I just felt like, whoa.
Mm.
I mean,
Something's
I didn't
uncomfortable.
there wasn't anything that he did. It was just the way that he said it. I felt like a possession. I felt like there was some conquer thing. It just felt different. Out of everything that I had experienced, it felt different. And I felt like
Mm.
I had made a mistake. And I didn't even think, what do I do? I don't even know what I thought at that point, because at this point,
Mhm.
remember, I was expecting.
Right.
So I was getting ready to well, I was scheduled to deliver several months after, and the babies came early. I had twins first, so they came early. So right after we got married, a month later, we're parents, and everything just kind of went from there. So I
Hmm.
wasn't prepared. I wasn't prepared. And then, of course, because it was traumatic for both of us, we kind of came together to take care of the kids. You know what I mean? So we were now in parent mode, not thinking about marriage or relationship. We're in parent mode because the babies were small. We had to go through 3 months of them being in the hospital, all of that stuff. So it appeared that we were working together at that point.
Right. And so when it shows back up after you evolve through the parenting of the beautiful twins, my nieces. So after you are parenting and it shows back up in your marriage now and as a mom, can you talk a little bit about what that felt like as a woman and maybe be able to help some other women who may be going through those feelings, and then how you might have doubted or questioned yourself, going back to even what you said initially, like, that initial comment made you take pause. But as you evolve through the relationship, what were some of the other things that when you look back on were symptomatic of your circumstance and where you felt uncomfortable and unsettled?
So I think that after we had the babies, I had to go back to work. He lost his job. So that was major for me because I didn't want to go back to work initially. I wanted to stay at home once the babies came home, things like that. So I think there was a part of me that even though I knew I had to continue to go to work, I felt bad that he didn't have a job. And as a result of him not having a job, I found myself helping him through that. And I feel like, a lot of times when we overgive, a lot of times when we over help, I know that's not really an adjective, but we have the tendency as women to over nurture. And quite honestly, a man can be a man and he doesn't need our help. So the things that should be normal, like, okay, he doesn't have a job, but I just had twins, C-section, back at work, and I'm managing my situation quite well. I mean, not, you know what I mean? I'm
No,
still
I know
functioning.
what you mean. But
So
it's like we overdo over, I
we're,
always
we're
say,
in the midst
oh,
of
we
our trauma,
overdo, right. We
helping
overdo,
somebody else.
overgive, kind
Yes.
of over, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so it was that.
Mhm.
So at the end of the day, I'm doing all these things, and what I was doing in my home, taking care of my kids and working, that's normal. So him not having a job, and he has to go through life too. I mean, it's like we're adults here. I don't have to. So that I think I started taking that on. I started taking on, giving him encouragement, giving him trying to be that wife and things like that. And I think he just started going downhill. Maybe he didn't feel, I don't know what his thought processes were, because quite honestly, I was so overwhelmed with keeping it all together. And
Right.
that was another thing. Like, I'm still working. I'm still on the praise team at church. I'm still taking care of two babies and taking care of it all. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it was a lot. It was just a lot. And I feel like because it was a lot, you don't know what you're dealing with until you sit down and tell somebody what happened.
Right. And it sounds like what I hear you sharing is that you were over contributing to burden carrying. It
Woo.
was as if you had, we all have our own share of burdens, and then we have the audacity to want to pick up somebody else's
Right.
in the name of we're helping, right? And so even though our motives are good and pure, sometimes it is a detriment to ourselves. Whether you're in a situation that's healthy or not, from a relational perspective, is unhealthy from yourself. So what I hear you saying is that, you were working, you had the twins, you had extracurricular activities, you had a husband who wasn't necessarily where he needed to be or wanted to be, and or wasn't necessarily feeling what he needed to feel as a man. And so you took the position to not only just encourage, but really to carry the burden of his emotions. And
Right.
so when the relational pitfalls started to show up, and you started to see other signs and symptoms of it, post the twins. Can you talk a little bit about what that looked like and what that felt like? And more importantly, how did you react to that within your own person? Because I think it's important for those who find themselves in that situation to understand our emotions and some of the things that we may do and may want to avoid doing in the future.
So, I think after the twins were born, there was a period of time where there was some drug use. So, I think that contributed to a lot of the depression. I think that contributed to the lack of being able to get employment. There were days where there was a binge, and when he came home, I have to deal with, I feel sorry. I'm sorry for myself. I feel all that for days before he's back on his feet from an emotional place or from a need to get attention place. So I'm taking care of that piece of it. For me, um, it was more disappointing, I think, than it was embarrassing as well, I have to say. Because there were times when I would go to church and he was really out on a binge and people would ask me where he was and I would say he was out of town.
So that's what I was going to ask you, because I think it's really important for us to also address the fact of how we tend to hide, right? Whether we're hiding our own personal imperfections or the imperfections in our lives that show up through our relationships, and the impact that that has on you as a woman, as a mom, and all of the other roles that you're fulfilling. So I'd love for you to kind of go into what did that do for Sheryl, right? Like, you're in this circumstance as you're starting to share where you are now showing up inauthentically and pretending to be in a situation that you're not, or covering for someone else for whatever reason. So can you talk a little bit about that weight and what
Yeah,
that
so
looked like and felt like for you?
that part was really hard because
Right.
I think that for me the babies were a distraction, quite honestly.
Mhm.
I think that because I had so much that I had to manage, I really wasn't seeing anything. I was just doing everything. And
Right.
so going to church, if I stayed active, at this point that they were old enough where I can pass them around, people could hold them and all that kind of stuff. So I could still do what I was doing. So it was, I think the activity for me provided the release, but when I got back home, everything was reality at that point. you know I still have to get up, I still have to do what I need to do, I still have to get up in the morning, then I have to deal with, did he get a job today, did he keep the job, that kind of thing. It was the back and forth of it all, and I think that for me, keeping it together kept me together, if that makes sense. So,
Right.
like, I talk about this all the time, talk about functioning in the dysfunction. That's really what I was doing. I mean, I was
Right.
doing everything as if it wasn't going on, and it was going on.
Right.
You
So
know what I
keeping
mean?
yourself so busy to the point that you don't have time to think or feel about the reality of your
Right.
circumstances. And
Absolutely.
so not only with the day-to-day responsibilities that you have as a working mom and as an employee or employer and as a mother, but also the extracurricular activities and all of the other things that we can consume ourselves with so that we don't have to face the reality of the
Oh yeah.
things that really is crushing our spirit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it took, I mean, like I said, until I had to sit down, and since nobody knew, right? So this is my world. Nobody even knows what's going on. So how could they know that I'm dealing with anything different? And
Right.
keeping a smile on my face kept a smile on my face. So it was almost like I was living in a double world, but it was so, I can't even, it's really a surreal place to be. And for whatever reason, I will say, for me, that's not the case for everybody, but really for me, I honestly felt like I was going through what I was going through for the people to come after me. I never thought this was my situation. I always in my mind felt like I'm doing this for the rest of the people. So I
Mhm.
never felt phased until I actually had to talk about it. But while I was going through it, in my mind, I felt like God chose me for this so that the other people can see how I came through. Like, in my mind, I never thought I wasn't going to make it. I know that sounds like crazy, but in my mind, I
No, it
never thought
doesn't. It doesn't. I think,
I never
yeah.
thought I wasn't going to make it. And there were times when I was so done with being the sacrificial lamb, because really what it was. I guess there's a false sense of humility that you have to suffer for the cause and all that stuff. I think there was a time I never thought about being so low that I would take my life, but I thought a lot of times about I wanted him to see me not be there, and I wanted to see what his response was.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I didn't feel like I would take my life. I just wanted to see what his response would be. And it wasn't until he told me that he would take my life and then go help look for me with my family that I thought he doesn't give a damn. I mean, like, who says that, right?
Yeah,
So
somebody
it wasn't
cuckoo for
until
Cocoa
he
Puffs.
said that, and I thought, okay, now I have to protect myself. Like, I think up until that point, I was in this mystery, magical. I don't know what it was, but
Well,
I've never.
you truly disassociated with your trauma. I mean, and we hear about that all the time, right? I mean, people are in a circumstance and you learn how to navigate through your circumstances based on the tools that you have. There are some people who may not navigate in the same way in which you did. I mean, and this is for a different time and a different place, but I have my own share of circumstances that I went through. And like you, I never felt like, oh my God, life is over. But, we're all wired differently. But at the end of the day, what I hear you saying is that you chose to continue to press through, but you did have to disassociate with what you were going through in order to press. And so you fulfilled your time and your space with so many other things and activities that you didn't really have to face your reality on an ongoing basis until your reality was in your face.
Right. That's
Right?
right. That's right. And I didn't, and it didn't get in my face until so when he was at work and he's doing whatever he's doing, it didn't start to affect me. I mean, I didn't pay attention to the effect that it had on me
No,
until
you didn't.
until we got to the place where he said that. When he said that he would take my life and then go with my family as if he was looking for me, he would help put up signs and walk,
Like a Lifetime movie.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
So
we see
I think
those.
at that point, I realized, okay, this isn't, something's not
So
right.
so let's go through. You have baby number 3, you have baby
Sure.
number 4, and now you're living in this state of chaos, quite frankly. Showing up as this jovial, happy person. We all know you are the peacemaker, the pleaser, the friend. You're the connector. You're everybody's best friend. Everybody loves Sheryl. That could be a show. And literally, because everybody loves Sheryl. But the reality of it is, what we recognize for those who are listening to it is that you can have people in your own intimate space and not even really know the intimacy of the person.
Right.
And so I think that as you were going through this and baby 3 came and baby 4 came, can you share some of the things that were going on in your home as you continue to navigate outside of your home and disassociate with those things?
So what happened, I think at this point I had all 4 of the kids, and
Right.
I decided after that conversation to file a restraining order. I decided to leave. I decided to file a restraining order. I called my sister and my dad and told them all of the pertinent information, all of his pertinent information. If anything happens to me, we had that conversation. Um, and it wasn't until I went through, because I filed a restraining order in the state of California, they have a program that you're mandated to go through. And because of that program, I think that's what started. So filing a restraining order was part of the process. Actually, him having a conversation with me started the process. Me going through the filing the restraining order, then going through that personal empowerment class, I think was the beginning of my eye opening, because in the 3rd class, I was told by the facilitator, or we were told by the facilitator, all of the women in that class, that the success rate for domestic violence is 3%. And that has stuck with me since then.
Right.
So what that means is whether it's mental, verbal, emotional, sexual, financial, whatever type of abuse that is, the success rate is 3%. And so for me, that was an eye opener because once I figured out we were in this situation, I'm thinking, Jesus can fix it and all this kind of stuff you get from church, and you try to be the excellent wife and all these things. But that 3% statistic is a fact. And there
Right.
is no going back from the fact. And I even asked the facilitator, are you talking about if even with Jesus? Like, because surely Jesus can fix it. And the thing that she told me was that if the perpetrator does not go through at least a year of therapy slash counseling slash anger management courses or whatever, they don't get that they are the person that has created this issue. It takes them at least a year to admit and try to get help with regard to the issue. And what happens in that year is that we bring them back, quite honestly. And that is what happened to me. I remember filing a restraining order. It was October. My birthday is in October. So, that was the first holiday, I guess, if you will, without him. And then Thanksgiving came. Well, by the time Thanksgiving came, the kids start asking for their dad. And then I'm like, oh, I'm keeping their dad from them, blah, blah, blah. Then the holiday, Christmas came. So Thanksgiving, he came back home, but I didn't tell anybody. So when people asked me what I was doing for Thanksgiving, I said, I'm just going to chill with the kids. I'm going to cook something. And nobody asked questions. Nobody said, well, I'm coming over there. Don't worry about that. So I was able to skate through Thanksgiving. By Christmas, he was there. And by that following March, I left him because the escalation came, which was another thing that I learned in the class. You have that honeymoon phase, escalation.
But up through that time, I think, you make such great points around how we can navigate through trauma, any kind of trauma, and we disassociate with it by these fillers in our lives that give us what we need in order to avoid and face our reality. And so, but when we go back and we look at our reality, I can remember some things, obviously, as your friend that we talked about, like locking doors and taking doorknobs off of doors, or taking keys, or not allowing you to exit through a garage, or just so many different things.
And that was all in the same night. Can we say that? It was all in the same night. That night, yes. That was like huge. That was huge. And the kids were in the house. So he used to come up to, as it started getting closer, and this is all like closer to the end. So up until that point, he's wonderful at church. Everybody's like, oh, he's just so wonderful. He's standing up when you sing and he's so supportive. And I'm standing there with a stoic face and everybody's like, you see, he's really being, I could not bring myself to enjoy the moment because on the way home, it would be a cuss out session on the way. Once we got to the house. I mean, so for me, this was like, I can't. At that point, he had two worlds and they were one at home, one at church. Well, as it started getting closer to the end or closer to the point where I was leaving, it started to escalate. And now he couldn't keep those worlds apart. But I remember, and he used to call up to my job. He used to come up to my job. So he came, he called one day because he had lost his job at this point. So, hey, he got a whole lot of free time. He called my job and I couldn't talk to him because I had the management in my office, and he's cursing me out on the phone, telling me that I'm, sleeping with some people that I was dealing with. And I actually my job was working with the Welfare to Work program. No shade, but I'm not really interested in the recipients as, dates. But okay. Anyway, he called my job. He cursed me out. My management was sitting in front of me, and I said, oh, okay, thank you so much. Talk to you later. And I just hung up the phone. Well, I knew that was going to be a big deal. So, of course, I was avoiding it. I finally decided to go home, and I had rehearsal that night. So my goal was to go home, change clothes, and leave and go right to church. But on the way home, for whatever reason, like the Lord was telling me, you're going to be dealing with him. Just don't say anything, So I get to the house, and he said, so we need to have a conversation. And I just stood there. Okay. We need to go in the bedroom. So we went in the room. He locked the bedroom door. I don't know why I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't paying attention. So he locks the bedroom door. We need to have a conversation. So he's going on. I don't even remember what he was saying. All I remember was the Lord told me, don't say anything. And so I'm standing there. He's talking to me. And then when the conversation is over, he said, do you have anything you want to say? And I was like, I just shook my head and I started getting clothes out the closet. He said, well, where are you going? I said, I have rehearsal. He said, well, you're late. I said, well, that's okay. I'm still going to go. And I just kept it cool. I didn't say anything. And then he left out the room, came back in the room and threw these phones on the bed.
Right.
So I'm looking at the phones, like, where did he get these old phones? They were like, back in the day, we had the dial-up phones and the push button phones or whatever that you plug into the wall. And so I'm looking at the bed like, where did he get these from? The thrift store? I wasn't even thinking. And I asked him, where'd you get those phones? He said, these are our phones. And I looked again and they were the phones from the house. Like he had unplugged the phones.
Right.
Like, so I'm standing there and I'm thinking, okay, the kids are in the playroom right behind us. And then he had the keys and he threw those on the bed. Well, we had double bolted doors, so they wouldn't have been. I was thinking in that moment, I was thinking, so one, the kids knew at that point how to call 911. They couldn't call 911 because he had unplugged the phones and he took the keys out the deadbolt. So nobody could have gotten out the house. At that moment, I just started shaking and I was thinking, I got to get out of here because I got to think. I got to plan my escape. Like in my mind, I was thinking, this is so crazy. And so when I got ready to leave, he said, let me let you out. And I said, well, no, I'm good. I can, and I was trying not to let him see my face, but I was like, I'm making a beeline so I can get to the church so I can tell somebody what's going on. And so I said, well, I can get out. He was like, no, let me let you out. When we went to the garage, he had parked his van crossways across the driveway. So even if I had tried to lift up the garage, let's say I finally made it to the door or whatever, he had blocked the drive. So I was like, this is really bad. Like, this is really bad. That's when I think, so the things started piling up from the conversation to, the restraining order, now let him back home. And the lady told me at the class, this was going to escalate. And this was my escalation. So at this point, I said, I got to get out of here because he unplugged the phone. And then I thought, I'm not even paying attention. Like,
you're not even conscious.
I'm oblivious to the whole thing. Like you pulled out all the phones in the house. How did that happen?
So let's talk about that because I think, we become what is surrounding us and we literally can start to embrace and live within these dysfunctional situations. It's just a matter of how extreme they are, right? And so what you started off with in the beginning, in terms of when you first got married and the comment was made, all the way up to now, and how you were able to ignore different circumstances that would happen and continue to live as it wasn't your reality. And so you literally were continually living as if it weren't your reality, and then showing up with other people so that people really didn't even know the things that you were going through. Right?
Bang, that's killing me.
The bang is beautiful, baby. You look fine. But I mean,
that's exactly right. I mean, and the thing is, so here's the thing. So there were a couple people that I gave hints of what was going on to because and this is what I've learned as I've gone along. When things don't add up, they don't have to add up to anybody else. They just need to add up for you. So if you feel uncomfortable and somebody else says, I don't feel uncomfortable about that, that's them. Be okay with the fact that you don't feel comfortable. And I think for me, there was some things I was just like, is this crazy? Because some things I know about myself, one of the things that I know about myself is that number one, I'm extremely passionate. Number two, I know that I can go back and forth with the best of them. I know I got a little banter, I got a little sarcasm, I got a little edge. So every now and then I have to check to see if this is me or the other person, or if I need to check something. So anyway, I ran it past a couple of people, and based on the response, I decided not to say anything. And here's why. And this is what people need to understand about people who are in a situation. When you tell somebody that you are in a situation and you live with that person or that person frequents your home, meaning the perpetrator, you cannot tell a person who's going to say, "What? I told them," because
Exactly.
you will you will shut down. And here's why. And a lot of people don't understand this about domestic violence. If I tell you and you fly off the handle, and I, based on my circumstances, based on fear, based on whatever, have to go back home, you're not there anymore.
Right.
You're not there to protect me. So I can't make this a big deal. I can't. If you are dealing with, if you are listening to a person who's telling you they're in a situation, they're in an abusive situation, listen to me. You have to be so low. You have to be so sliding on the ground with your strategy to help that person get out,
Right.
because the person who is committing that crime against them, who's perpetrating that domestic violence against them, trust me, is so sensitive to every single thing, every single person around them, every single movement that's different. They have calculated and watched the person that they are abusing for so long
Right.
without them even knowing that. They know their patterns, they know their movements, they know what they're going to say, they know what a raised eyebrow means. They have watched and studied that person. So if you come in as the friend, the family member, the person that's just going to bogart your way through, and you plan on taking somebody out of that situation, you need to take them all the way out. Do you hear what
Exactly.
I'm saying? You need
Exactly.
to move them to a whole nother place. Don't think you're going to take them and they can stay at your house and still go back to work, because their perpetrator knows where they work. He knows where their
Exactly.
kids go to school. He knows where she goes to church. He knows her movements. So if you can't go in and do all that, understand that what you need to have is a strategy, and you have to move low. You have to
Exactly.
move in
And
silence.
and
You have to
and I
move
will
like the
say
CIA, the Navy
exactly.
SEAL,
Exactly. I mean,
because
unfortunately,
she will be killed behind that. It is so life or death. It is so important that if you choose to help somebody in that situation, you better believe that your situation is dire enough where she can lose her life by going
right.
back. Period.
And you do really have to understand that. I mean, obviously,
And
you know,
everybody can't make that move.
right,
Everybody cannot
right,
rescue. You may think
right.
you have the rescue bones to do it. It does. Everybody cannot do that. I'm telling you. It is a quick, sudden life or death decision. It's a yes or no. You got to take everything that person has when you take them in, whatever that is. If it's kids, if it's whatever it is. So if you're not prepared to do that, you can't be mad because they didn't ask you to do it. You can't
Right.
be
And
mad
quite
if you
frankly,
weren't chosen in the moment.
and it's not necessarily, I mean, I don't know because our situation just unfolded the way that it unfolded. But obviously, we haven't even ever talked about anything I felt in the moment. But everything you described is aligned with what you have to, what you feel. Because quite frankly, even the rise up to want to do anything other but save can't be within you when you're in the process of saving. Because that becomes about you and what you're feeling. And what you do have to also remember is that the victim will then take on your emotions because that's what they are used to doing. And
Yeah.
so, had we had a conversation and I went to this, what I'm going, which all of those conversations, I may have felt, but at the end of the day, that's one more burden on you because now you have to worry about, oh, well, shoot, now what's Sheryl going to do or say? And so that's another layer of fear. And so the
Right.
strategy to exit is exactly what you said. It becomes about how do we make a move so that you can actually make a move, and that's got to be a long-term move, and so it's a
And I don't
sacrificial
know that
move.
you knew. I don't know that you knew in that moment what that was going to look like. It was really just. It was really just a yes, and we didn't know what it was going to look like, how it was going to. I mean, neither one of us knew. It was just. I knew for me, if I went back, I already knew what. I feel like I know what was going to happen. And here's the crazy part: I left, went underground for 30 days, moved out the state, started a whole new journey, and still was in danger. That's the part. It's not enough for you to be in danger in your situation. She's more in danger once she leaves. That's the part that people don't get as well. You can't just now she's out. Okay, thanks. Woohoo. That's it. Because as long as he knows where to reach her, how to reach her, he's going to try to find her. Most men don't let it go if they're really that far gone, if that makes sense.
Right.
And so I was in more danger, even though I didn't know. I didn't know I was in more danger, but I didn't know who he was having conversations with, because once I left, that was it. I didn't care who he's having conversations with. I had moved on. A whole year and a half had passed. I was not even with him anymore. But did I know that he was back home telling people at the church he was going to try to get his family back and we were reconciling? I had no idea he was saying all that. They paid for him to get a truck to move all this stuff to come here with me. That in
Right.
itself was crazy to me.
When you think about some of the things that took place in terms of decisioning, if there were things that you could do differently from that decisioning, up until, let's just say, the moment of the reconnect, and we can talk about the details of what happened there. If there were things, if you could talk to another woman, and you can now on this podcast, and really talk to another woman about the things that you could or would have done differently. Is there any tips or anything that you would tell them about what you feel you could have done differently or you would have done differently now that you know the outcome of where you were up until the moment of the reconnect?
So, yes, what I could have done differently once I left, um, and he decided to move closer, what I should have done was to, when it was time to exchange the kids, um, first of all, he was under restraining order, so he shouldn't have been exchanging the kids. Let's just start there. But
Let's just
I
start there.
let's start there. But here's the thing. I got so tired. I had 4 kids. I was by myself and I needed a break. Quite honestly, that's how it happened. I needed a break. He was here. What I should have done and still could have done was to have someone to exchange, like, there needed to be a person in our stead, or a person that would be the go between, that he was supposed to be supervised with the kids. I did that a couple of times with family members, and I recognized, and this goes back to why women kind of get in that trap. I recognized, or I felt like, this is me, that it was a burden, right? Because they had to put their day into being the person to monitor him with the kids. So I stopped that. And I said, after a few times he was acting okay, I would make sure that he got the kids anyway. So every other weekend, I would take the kids. So he was 3 states over. I would drive 3 hours. He would drive 3 hours. We met at the exit, and I would give him the kids. He would take them back. I would go back home. And again, on Sundays, we would do the same thing. Now, so here's the danger part. And thank God I was protected in that. He didn't nut up. I didn't have a situation on the side of the road and all that kind of stuff. But it could have gone that way. So here's the thing. When when you are in a situation, domestic violence situation, especially when you have a restraining order, it is never safe. It is never safe. You can never relax. You can never let your guard down. You need to always understand that the restraining order is in place for a reason. In my case, I did not do that. Now, like I said, I was blessed, lucky to the fact that he did not do anything in that exchange. But once he decided to move in a little closer to me, come all the way up to where I lived, not to my house, but to the area, the general area, then I found him a extended stay place where he could stay. Of course, I made it close to my house. Again, here's what I'm saying. I was not thinking, because it had been over a year and a half. I had started my life. I wasn't thinking about him like that anymore. And
So let me
so
ask you, let me interrupt you because I don't want us to run out of time. And obviously, we're very good friends. And during that time, we had a lot of good conversations around behavioral patterns. And I don't know if some of those conversations kind of escape your mind because you tend to stay in a happy place. So my recollection of it is very different than that. Yes, that's the general, but my recollection of the circumstance of you moving and even choosing to reconnect or have conversation on the phone. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but we used to argue about that on the telephone,
about having a
because
conversation
it
on the
was
phone.
about you dealing with him, period. Because so from a friend perspective, and I never let up, I never let up, period. But from a friend perspective, is there advice that you can give a friend? Because I never didn't the possibility of what ended up happening never escaped my mind. It was always at the forefront of my mind. So for me, our conversations around we did all of this for you to reconnect with them, and then now you're talking to him, and now you're making it convenient for him to see the kids. um, in some instances, there is a level of pain that goes with the friend that's walking alongside, and you're going to set that aside because it's really about the other person's life. But is there any advice that you can give those who walk alongside of individuals who may see that the way that that individual is moving can continue to put them in danger, and yet that individual is not hearing what they're saying? When you think back to that time, is there anything that even I could have done differently? Because I mean, we're best friends. So, I'm going bananas on you on a regular basis. And yet I felt like I wasn't having any impact. Is there something else that could have been done or said? Or is it just your journey to walk? And I think that's important for people to understand.
So that's an interesting question because I think that it's layered because I will say that what what made what made me open my eyes, uh it was just layered because there were people who had been through things, and I really think that telling your story is the best. I think telling your story is the best thing because it wasn't until I saw or heard other people that had, so I didn't know until for a while that you had been through something. Until later. I don't know. We didn't talk about it, and I guess it came up when it came up, but it's not until you talk to other people who have been through it that have seen the same things, um that can tell you. I don't really know how to answer that question, but
Mm-hmm.
I heard what you said. I thought in my mind, at that point, I didn't identify that you had done it, that you had been through it. I don't think, or it didn't click. If we talked about it, it didn't click for me. So I really thought that he had rehabilitated to some level. And I really, honestly, was tired. I really think that the
Right. And
resources,
that's what you used to say. I
I
mean, that's what we would
I was
talk about.
just
Right.
so I was just so tired. And I wasn't tired like physically. I was just mentally drained. I wanted a break. It was like, and I recognize that motherhood is difficult, but I did not have a break. I felt like if I could just get a day, if I could just get, and I trusted him with the kids, quite frankly. I didn't
Right.
trust it. I didn't think that he would do anything with the kids. Now, as time went on, I thought there were times when I thought, what if he does something to the kids because he can't have me? And that came
Mm-hmm.
up because he would ask me. Initially, he was glad to see the kids. So he was, but as time went on, he would ask me, what was I doing? And then I thought when I did the exchange, I hope he doesn't do anything to the kids because he was mad, because he was mad at me.
Well, I know
Um,
I don't want us to run out of time, but I definitely want to address. So, you go through this whole situation, unfortunately and fortunately, because you're using everything that you've gone through in order to make a difference in the lives of others. And like what you said, I really believe that there are those of us that are chosen, and what may seem to be, the most devastating experience for some literally becomes probably one of the most motivating experiences for others. So, I certainly applaud you for using what you've been through in order to really help other women pivot forward. So, talking about the fact that what you went through, and then, the journey to move from state to state and to go into hiding, to leave your home with nothing. I mean, we talked about it on the squad. And then to literally move and relocate your family, start all over. And then a year and a half later to reconnect with the level of trust because you're tired as a parent. And then ultimately the breaking point. Can we talk about that? And then what you would say to women who may be navigating in a circumstance and be at a different phase in that, based on the end result of what ultimately ended up happening the day that he met you and the kids and pulled the gun on you guys.
Okay. So ultimately what happened, there was a weekend that he had the kids. He kept reaching out to talk to me, and I just told him, we're not going to have a conversation. He wanted to go to dinner. We couldn't, he still had the kids, so I just decided to let him have the kids a little later, keep them a little longer. And basically, long story short, at the end of that visit, when I went to pick the kids up, he pulled a gun on me. And that was like the worst thing ever. Certainly with the kids being in the car and all of that, it was just a traumatic thing. And what I could have done differently that day is probably not to go up, because I remember you called me that day. I had gotten to the hotel and you asked me not to go upstairs. And I said, girl, ain't nobody thinking about him. I'm going upstairs, blah, blah, blah. We had a conversation, even though it didn't take place upstairs, it took place downstairs. But just that
Right.
whole exchange might have been different had I not gotten out the car and, just kept it just the facts, have him come bring the kids. Maybe it wouldn't have been different. So I can't say that I don't know in terms of what I would have done different. Again, when you have a restraining order in place, follow the lesson of the restraining order. Follow the rules of the restraining order, and make sure. Okay, so sorry, my producer just said if we go past the time, just leave us on the screen. So that's fine. Thank you, thank you.
No,
Um,
we're good. We're good.
so yeah, so the main thing would be follow the restraining order. First of all, file the restraining order. And there's so many things that you have to keep to yourself when you're moving in that situation. You can't let him know that you're leaving. You have to make sure that whoever you're dealing with, that you've told your situation, has to be a silent partner, because any move that they make could jeopardize your life. You have to be strategic when you leave, and your pattern just has to absolutely change. So for me, I had a brand new job. I ended up not starting the job because, of course, I went underground. But everything that you used to do, you can no longer do. You can't assume that your friends are still your friends and they're not talking to your ex or your husband. You can't assume that. Everything now, once you leave the house, literally becomes life or death. There's no other middle ground. It is life or death. Anything somebody says to him about you, anything somebody shares to him about you, anything that somebody does with the same pattern that you've executed all this time could be your life or your death. Period. It's just that serious. And if we don't start one, having the conversation about it, and two, really trying to get to the heart of what that looks like when you haven't been in that situation, is that gap has to be bridged more than anything else. People who
You know,
haven't been in it,
mhm.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think when I think about everything that you have shared, one of the things that I would also add as a friend, and both being a victim of domestic violence and working with you and navigating you through that transition from, California to Atlanta is that you've got to give somebody permission to tell you the truth about yourself. And you've got to make the decision when you give that person the permission that you're going to listen to them. Because in order to go through domestic violence, I think what I hear you saying is that you literally have to become somebody else in order to continue to navigate through that process. And it's not about how long you navigate, whether it's 30 days or 30 years. In order to continue to deal with anything that forces you to disassociate with your circumstances, in order to continue to keep moving forward, you literally have to turn yourself off. And so you've got to give somebody the permission that can
Yeah.
bring you back to the reality. I think that's one of the things that I recognize in our relationship. And when you do go to that person, if you happen to be the individual that's going to help another person navigate through that transition, you've got to know that it is not about you. I mean, to your point, and we never really talked about it, Sheryl, but when the decision was it's going to be this day, it really was just an activation. It was a matter of, yes, there were certain people. I'm a strategic thinker. So there were certain people that I knew that I could call to do certain things in certain places that you could go. But there was a positioning that was going to need to be taken in that I had to be willing to risk my relationship with you to save your life. And so
Yeah.
that meant that it didn't matter to me how you felt about some of the things that I was going to say or some of the things that I was going to tell you that we had to do, because it was a lot of tears during those times. But at the end of the day, I appreciate, you loving yourself and your children and trusting me enough. But at the end of the day, for those individuals who may want to support somebody through that process, you got to be willing to sacrifice the relationship to save that person.
Well, and that
Because
and I think just continuing to tell them that they're worth getting out. I think
exactly.
the first time you hear it, you're not really, you're just so caught up. But if you just keep, and I don't mean remind them to say, "Girl, you stupid. Why you say?" I'm not talking about
Mm-mm.
that. There's a way that you tell somebody the truth and you just continue. It's just constant. It's just constant saying you're worth more than this. You can do this. We will figure it out. All of those things. And you may not have a clue on how you're going to figure it out. But what you can do is way better than what they're dealing with. And so I
Right.
think just the reiteration of you can do this. We're going to get through this. Like they're not alone. I think that was like the main thing. Like, I understand somebody wants to help me. They want to help me get out, but I need you to help. And I didn't know that I needed that. So let me just start by saying that. But the person needs you to help them get out and hold their hand as they're coming out. You can't just say, "Okay, we freed you. Now let you go." And then just they walk in
Right.
the street. I mean, you literally have to hold that person's hand until they're ready. And that's a sacrifice. It's a sacrifice because I went through, I know, a million emotions. Did I take my kids from their dad and all this stuff? And it's like, you're alive. Can
And
we
that's the bottom line.
can we
And
start with
that's
that?
really the bottom line. That's the bottom line.
And that's
And I
that's
think
the most important part. And the rest of it we'll figure out. But let's get you out and let's keep you alive. And we'll talk about it on the other side of that. But I don't want to watch you go down. I don't want to see you laid up in some casket somewhere. I don't want to try to have to explain to your kids why I didn't pull you all the way out. I just grabbed your arm and then I let you close the door back. I mean, it literally is life or death. And I think when people understand how detrimental it is and how important it is for you not only to assist, but stay consistent in the process. Because even years later, there's some things that I still waffle with. There's some
right.
insecurities that I still run a check past somebody else to see if what I'm thinking is okay. There's times when I still, wonder if I never wonder. Now, let me say this. I never wonder if the decision I made was right.
Right.
Never. Not one time did I go back. Thanks, Daryl. He's leaving. Not one time did I go back and say, I wish I could have. Not one time did I go back and say I could have done, not one time.
Right.
So let me just be clear on my situation. And so because of that, and I don't know if it was because I waited until I was absolutely ready and didn't have anywhere else to go. I don't know if that was, I don't know the factors, and the factors for me don't matter. But what I will say is if the woman is not sure, she's not going to stay gone.
Right. Exactly.
That's the sad part.
And I think it's important that you have the support. It's very, very important that when you decide that you're going to stand up for someone and you're going to walk alongside them, then you've got to walk alongside them regardless of the choices that they make. Even
That's the
when they
part.
choose to stay, even when they choose to leave, even when they waffle after they leave, the bottom line is you've got to walk them through the journey until they get to the point where they can actually tell another woman's story. And so I
Yep.
think that, it's just a blessing that, you have continued through the journey and you're sharing your story with everybody and that you did make that decision and ultimately that you are free and now you're doing what you're doing. So if you had some takeaways for individuals, do you have anything else that you would say other than what you have? Because that's
Well,
been
I have a
amazing
question
and
for
I'm
you.
super
I have
proud
a
of you.
question for you. Thank you. I have a question for you. Um, Before you knew what was going on, what made you think there was something going on? Because if I was able to manage my personality as effervescent as I have been in all of our years, what made you think something was going on? What made you think that?
Well, I will say, I unfortunately have gone through this with a couple of people, but with you, I mean, we have a very intimate relationship, and I can see you beyond all of the extra and the glamour and the laughs and the this and that. And more importantly, I could see the interaction between you and your husband at that time.
So was I not
And for
smiling on the
me,
side? What
you was
like
always smiling, but you
what
always
did you
smiling
see?
now.
I need to know what did you see, because this is why I'm asking you that. Not only because I want to know, because I do want to know, but I think there are people who might be right next to a person who's dealing with it. And
Well, there are. I mean, you know that there was
so
another
what did you
person that,
see? What did you see?
for me, what I saw in you was pain.
How?
That's what I
How
saw.
did you see that?
I don't know that I can tell you how. I don't know if it's something because you know that there's another friend that she ended up confiding in me that she was going through, and I'm not in her squad. I'm not in her, but I was the person that she confided in. But
Well,
I
that's what I'm wondering.
confronted
Like
her, and I
what
confronted her just like with you. It was just it just for me, it was, and maybe it was because I had been through domestic violence as a younger person and having
and that's
gone
the part.
through it, I understand, the multiple personalities that show up in order to press through. But sometimes, when you're overdoing, overcommitting, and over, and you stated over help, even though that's not an adjective,
Right.
it's symptomatic of pain. And so I do understand that about people. And when people can't sit still or they're always laying down, something's
Yeah.
off. And so I think that when we really take the time to see people beyond the experience that we want to have with them, but really see into their soul, and you just take the time to have the conversation, when people feel safe with you,
Right.
they'll
Right.
share. And
Yeah.
the safety doesn't mean that they feel like you are going to tell their story or not, or you're going to judge them. The safety means that they know that you'll walk through the story with them or the journey with them without judgment. And at the end of the day, for me, it wasn't just you. There was 4 lives at stake. And I think I said to you way back then, look, I'll risk the relationship to save you, but we can't keep doing this. And
Right.
so I think that it just is really being able to see people for who they are. And I think that in today, we are we're just so doggone busy
Yeah.
that we don't take time to hear people. And it doesn't matter if I don't talk to you. I tell you all the time, you got 900 million best friends. But at the end of the day, when I sit down and we have our conversation, it's with the level of depth and understanding. And it's not what you always say, it's how you say and how you feel. So to go back to what it was, I guess for me, I would have to say it's a level of discernment and giving people an ability to feel comfortable enough to really be completely transparent. Because all of the extra that we bring, it lacks transparency 99.999% of the
Yeah.
time.
And it is
Everybody
asking
has some
questions.
pain.
It is asking the questions. And it is, and I was telling someone else, it is just as simple as asking somebody. First of all, let's just start with this. Every woman has intuition. Everyone.
Most.
Now, I believe God gave every woman. Now, whether or not you use it, but I believe he gave it to all of us. Now, we don't always use it. But what I will say is if we continue to ignore it, then yes, I believe it goes away. It fades off. Something else has a bigger voice or whatever you want to call that. Okay. So to me, when you ask someone how they're doing, first response is, I'm good. They turn around and walk away. I guarantee you, and we talked about this before on one of my podcasts, I guarantee you, if you turn them back around and you say, Sheryl, how are you really doing? That person will break down. They will tell you from the rooter to the tutor because nobody asks with any kind of sincerity. It's just like, how you
Right.
doing? I'm fine. Good morning. Good morning. Nobody goes any deeper than that. I guarantee you, if you ask somebody that, I guarantee you, they will turn around. I will never forget somebody at church asked me how I was doing. And that's the reason why I know. That's one of my daughters. Because they asked me how I was doing. I said fine. And she called me back and she said, how are you really doing? And nobody had asked me that because everybody sees you being whoever you are, whatever. And nobody really,
Right.
I don't even know if they care or they don't care. It's just so easy to say, how you doing? I'm fine.
Well, I
But
just
take
think
the
that,
time.
people are in so hurried. And, I always tell people, in fact, when somebody asks me how I'm doing, my response typically is, do you really want to know? Or are you just asking me because it's the thing to
Right.
ask? So that's also my approach with people when I ask. And the individuals who have chosen to share with me what they have gone through, it's been exactly that. When I've sat down with an individual who unfortunately is not here with us anymore and had that conversation and said, I'm going to ask you a question. And what I want you to do is, you can tell me that you don't want to say, but what you can't do is lie to me
Right.
because I already know that you're not okay. And
But that's the
so
part.
having those
That's the part.
conversations.
That's the part. That's the
Yeah.
part
And
that
I
we,
mean, in
that's the
that
part that we
moment,
need to get
she
to.
shared that what she was going through. And so I think that it really is just being able to show up for people at a level of sincerity. But when you show up, you've got to actually be there. You can't
Right.
show up in a moment, because once somebody discloses and brings you
That's
into
it.
that space, you got to be willing to walk them all the way through to the finish line.
And
And
it's a
it's
sensitive place. It's a
it's a
sensitive
very
place.
sensitive
And
place.
you only have the person who is sharing that they're in it has a moment of confidence that you're
Right.
going to help. And
Right.
guess what? If you blow that moment, they're not going to say it again. They're not going to say it
Right.
again.
Right. So that's very, very, very important. I mean, there's unfortunately a slew of people, unfortunately, that I've walked through this with, and it's not it's a very humbling experience. But I think that, God gives each of us our own individual gifts. I know that I have a gift of discernment, but it's really only because, to your point, I choose to tap into that which I have. And so for me, I mean, you've probably heard me say this. I don't really care what you say about how you feel, or, how you doing. It's more about what's really going on inside of you. And so I think that we do have to take the time when we do connect with people to actually really connect.
Right.
And so I think that's very, very important. But I'm grateful that you let me stay on. I know we ran a little bit over, so I
We got
apologize.
time. We
But
got time.
but I
Time.
appreciate it. I really do. I think this
I
is really
appreciate
helpful.
you, and I appreciate you standing up, because I know that that was a difficult job. I know that um you probably took some heat. I know that I probably was not privy to a whole lot of conversations that you may not have had. Um and I know that you sacrificed a lot. So I appreciate that you were there. I appreciate that you saw and you moved, and I appreciate that you stood in the gap. And I just appreciate the honesty piece, because I think that as delicate as I wasn't too delicate to hear the truth, but the truth made a difference, because I had to hear the truth so that I can move in the direction that I needed to move in. And that's the part that's so important, is that really, and I think once you've experienced it on either side, whether you're helping somebody or whether you're actually the person, what you recognize is it doesn't really matter how you feel about it, because the truth is what it is. And the results are so detrimental to your well being that you cannot move on your feelings. You have to
Right.
really move on the facts. And when I see, even now, the prevalence of domestic violence right now, I have never seen this many cases. I have never seen this. It is so out of control that it's every time I turn on the news, or every time I'm looking at my phone, I'm looking in my area, I'm looking at, these are young people, these are older people, these are people. I mean, it is so out of control. It is so out of control. And if we do
Right.
not start talking about it, I mean, for so long, the pandemic, was our excuse. But I really am going to start having in-house meetings with women, because this is out of control. It's way more
It
than
is.
a podcast can help. It is actually, quite honestly, what I feel right now, it's like I want to get the women in the same room, and I need some people who have been there, and I need some people who are willing to take the hit and have these real conversations, because people do not understand how serious this is. It is so serious that people are losing their lives, restraining orders or
Hmm.
not. There's nothing in place. I shouldn't say nothing. There's so many things that are not in place because we don't speak up.
Well,
There's
and
so many
I will
things.
say, just to I think that's an excellent idea. We'll come up with another show, because I think it would be great to have, a conversation with Cheryl, and literally have individuals on the show that can talk about their own experiences and really be able to navigate through, especially those who's had the privilege of getting out and then being able to use our circumstance to help others. But I think there's some critical things that, regardless if where your process is in any relationship in your life, I think the thing that's critical is that we have to understand what we need to do in order to not stay in a circumstance that doesn't yield us our highest return. And I think that when you start to experience something in any relationship, I don't care if it's with a man, a woman, your child, on a job, that's not meeting your individual needs,
Absolutely.
you've got to
Start
make sure
there.
to have some boundaries set in your life to be able
Right.
to exercise the power of no. And I think that
Right.
so often we become, going back to how you started it an hour 15 ago, these nurturers, that we feel this sense of obligation to others while we deny ourselves. And we cannot give our best self to others unless we take care of ourselves. So I
That's
would
right.
strongly encourage everybody to learn how to set some boundaries and get to know your own self and know what's important to you and what you need. And if something is not working for you, learn how to respectfully exercise those boundaries and say that that's not working for me. Use your no. I mean, we don't really use the no. We focus so much on, well, I don't want to rub somebody the wrong way, or I don't want to, sure, we have this conversation all the time. But well, I'm gonna just go on and do this. Then you got this anger and this resentment buildup. But that's part of living in a circumstance where you're not feeling as good as you should about who you are, because you've allowed somebody to take advantage of you. So just remember to set your boundaries and teach people how to treat you.
Well, here's
Right?
the
I
thing.
mean,
Because I went to a therapist, because I thought I was supposed to have this, grand uh moment after I left, with the kids in the house, and I was supposed to have this boohoo moment and drop to the floor. I had it all. I'm a creative, so I had the whole da 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 da. Right, I had this moment on the floor and blah blah blah, and I never ever ever had that moment. I never had
Right.
that moment. So I went to a therapist because I thought maybe I'm crazy and I should be having a moment. So let me talk to somebody who deals with crazy people and she could tell me how to have this moment because, this is what the therapist told me. She said, Sheryl, you're so entertaining. I love the way you talk about things and you wave your hands and you're just so. Okay, so that apparently was not the
Right
right
therapist.
therapist. So, but I did go to someone and I'm trying to figure out, do I need help? But I will say this, the one therapist that I did talk to, because I'm still searching for people to talk to, because maybe, he said, practice your no, just like you just said. And this is what he said. As simple as when someone says, can I borrow your pen? No. He said you don't have to make it major. Because
Right.
when
You
you're
don't.
practicing a no, as a person who's a giver, who gives all the time, I pull the shirt off my back in the cold because I see some little baby and I'm all crying. When you're an empath, you just give without thinking. So he said, practice with a pencil. Somebody says, can I borrow your pencil? No. He said, even if you're going to change it to a yes, start by saying no. And
Right.
you wait a few minutes and
Mm-hmm.
then you change your own mind. He was like, but that was just really a revelatory thing
Powerful.
because yes, I thought, somebody asked me for my pencil, girl. I thought I was doing something. No, I can't give you my pencil. And it was like, that's really like people say no all the time to me, but I couldn't say that. It took
Right.
some time. And
And most people who are victims of domestic violence don't say no. I mean, you know my story. I was a pleaser and a giver and an overdoer and over, I call it. And when you get to a point where you actually can say, no, I'm not okay with doing that today, or no, I don't really want to go there, or no, I can't participate in that, people start to look at you as if something is wrong with you. So you also have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because to transition from giving your whole self and sacrificing yourself, which we are not called to do. Jesus made the sacrifice for us. He doesn't need to do that part.
right.
But we when we're used to sacrificing ourselves, actually learning how to set boundaries and saying no is extremely uncomfortable.
I think
So
that
you
needs to
have
be
to
the first
really
class.
get
When we
comfortable being uncomfortable when you are transitioning into saying yes to yourself,
I think that
because
that
we
needs to be
don't
the
know how to
first
say
class.
yes to ourselves. And that's
So
something we need to do.
that's the part. You can think about it even as a mom, or I guess for people who don't have kids that have a husband or a significant other. How many times have we talked and laughed about it, about going to the store? We started out at the mall because we were supposed to get ourselves some whatever it was. We come back with baby shoes, baby hats, stuff for the husband. What? And where did you go? You went to get what? Because you're so busy not thinking of yourself all the time. So I think the first class, the first workshop, I'm gonna have something where the women come together and our first exercise will be saying no for the rest of the week until we come back the next time.
Well,
Seriously,
I think that's
because
an
it really
excellent
is a hard
idea.
task for people. It's really hard for people to say no. And they feel
Well, it's
bad
hard
about it.
for people to set boundaries, and whatever that boundary needs to be, I think that we need to learn how to set boundaries, and then we need to learn how to feel good about being okay with taking care of ourselves, and understanding that in taking care of yourself doesn't mean that you're not taking care of others. But when you burn the candle at both ends, when you overgive yourself, when you over contribute, when you overspend, when you overextend your emotions, when you overgive your finances, when you overgive everything you have, then you're no good really to yourself or nobody else. So you
Right.
can't be the best mate, the best mom, the best employee. You can't be the best anything when you over contribute. And so I think it's important for us to understand that. And when you're in a relationship with somebody that is taking more of you than you desire to give,
Right.
you've got to set those
You've already
boundaries.
started it up.
You've
So
got
let
to
me
set
ask you
those
this.
boundaries.
Let me ask you this. Because so the day that everything happened, when I was here, you were in California. What what did that feel like? Did you think I told her not to go up there? What what was your thought? First of all, because I don't even know how, I didn't even have my phone because he took my phone. I don't even know how you got the call that something had happened. All I remember you saying, and that whole day, the whole day was not a blur, but there are certain things that I do remember. The only thing that I remember you saying was, how are you going to work tomorrow? After all this has happened, how are you going to work tomorrow? And I said, I gotta go to work. I gotta go to work. You said this man just held a gun to your head. Your kids were in the car. You have to deal with them some kind of way. And I said, they got to go to school and I have to go to work. What did that feel like?
Well, what it feels like, and we're gonna have to have another show, but what it feels like is how it feels sometimes when I watch you overextend yourself in a way that's a detriment to yourself, because it's part of who you are. And so I recognize that, first of all, the compound question was, what did it feel like? Um, the day that the whole situation happened, there was something within me that just didn't want you there. And you know that. I mean,
You
we
called me when I
literally,
got the.
we went back and forth and, and all of that. And that was a decision that you made. And so for me, it wasn't about, I told you, I don't even think I ever had those kind of thoughts. For me, it was, how do I get to you? I mean, for me, that's really all that I thought, because we were so far away from each other. And, um, I've always felt like, been in like this overly protective mode of you, because I feel like sometimes you move reckless and you don't think about yourself. And so, um, that's has been the role that I took on for a long time. And I recognized that I had to also give you the space to just be who it is that you want to be, if it doesn't bring too much harm to you.
Right.
Um but I think that, so that was the first thing, was that once it happened, just, are you okay, and what do we do next? How do we safeguard you now? Because there's no point in talking about if I coulda, woulda, shoulda. It's, how do we pivot now? What is
Right.
the next move that we make so that this doesn't happen again? And at that point, then there was a listening ear, and you were into, but of course, again, I want you to care for yourself.
Right.
I want you to take time to go through what you've gone through and make sure that you're okay, and not just show up for the show every day. And so that was where I felt about you, taking the time for yourself. And even today, I feel like that with so many different things that you go through, because you give of yourself. And we both are the same. I'm going through a little bit of a transition now, where I'm having to take time for me, and that's a whole different conversation for a different day. But having gone through some of the things that I've gone through, I've had to learn to set some serious boundaries for myself, in order to safeguard myself and to be able to give my best self to the individuals in which I serve. And so I just think that, it felt painful. If I were to describe it in one word, probably fear, pain, and gratitude, all at the same time,
Right.
because it wasn't about knowing what happened. It was more about knowing that you were safe.
Right.
And
And
so,
it's so funny because that right after that, we lost people because of
right,
that.
right,
And so for me, it's always a point of gratitude because I actually know people that were in the same situation that are not here today.
right.
So for
As
me,
yeah,
it's so important to keep going, to keep talking about it, because there might be somebody even listening today or may listen to the podcast later or whatever, but there's somebody who's in that same situation. And it's just like, please get out, go low and get out. And
right,
that's the part. So every time I think about what could have happened, it's like that for me. I didn't think about that in the moment. I thought in the moment, God, I talked to you today and you didn't tell me this was going to happen. And he told me, put one hand on the horn and the other one on the window and scream like I showed you how to scream. And those were the instructions. Literally, like it was not, oh, I didn't know what to do. It was like he told me that. It was 1, 2, 3. Hand on the window, hand on the horn, use your soprano voice and scream like I showed you. And that's all and I felt like I was above myself in the moment. Nothing was going to happen to me. That's how I felt. And that's what's so crazy is that I always felt like my story was for somebody else to get. And that's
Well,
why
it
I have to keep
is,
telling
and
it.
that's why you have this platform. I think it is
That's why I have to
that
keep
because I
telling it.
think, yeah, and you do, and I think that it's over and over. And I hope that, like you said, if people watched it live or if they're watching it later, that they will, share this information with other people, so that individuals that's walking through this journey that Cheryl walked through are sitting on the side that I was in, that can support the individuals, that you really take the information that you're hearing and digest where you are in your own particular journey, and then make that decision that you're worth it,
Yeah.
and that you're going to make the move in order to save yourself and or save your loved ones, because it's critical that you do that. And for those of you who have been called to help somebody walk through it, just be committed to walking all the way through the journey.
And just be aware. I
Just
would like to
relay.
say for people to just really, especially women, because we have the intuition, I believe, just be so aware, if that makes sense. Just pay attention to your sisters when you see them. Pay attention to that. Pay attention when they're by
Right.
themselves. Pay attention when you have a moment to really ask how they're doing, if they're in a relationship and they're shifted or they're different or they change or they hide or you don't talk to them or they go underground, whatever. When you see that kind of stuff happening, be a friend and
And I'm
ask
gonna say this
questions.
before we get off, because I know we got to get off. We'll just jump on a phone call and we can keep talking. But
Okay.
the other thing that I want to say is you have to pay attention to the people in your lives that never share any pain,
Right.
because everybody goes through pain. And um
How about the bigger the
when they're
personality, the bigger the pain?
right, exactly. And so it's very important that you have that time where you can really sit down with somebody and have a real conversation with them. And don't be offended if they don't choose to share, because it might be the seed that you planted that causes it to grow in the next
Right.
conversation.
Right.
So you can always be a seed planter. You don't necessarily have to reap the harvest. And
That's
so I
right.
think it's really, really important that we do that. But we're gonna have to end this because
We're going to end
7:27.
it. We're going to
Yeah.
end it, but I would like to tell everybody, first of all, I want to tell you, if you are in a situation, and I have to put this number up, if you are currently in a situation, if you know anyone else who's in a situation, and even if you're not sure, you can actually call this number 24/7, 1-800-799-SAFE, and they will give you whatever you need for the area that you're in, and they are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The next thing that I want to give you is our website. If you have any questions or you want to see what we're doing at Another Woman's Story, please go to that website, put your name in, be a friend of our organization and put your name in so you can be on the mailing list and we can let you know other things that are happening. We are also on Instagram at Another Woman's Story. And then, of course, we're here on Facebook Live. We also have a YouTube channel. Sheryl, I don't know what information or if there's any information that you would like to share about yourself and what you're doing, but certainly Sheryl Jackson is her name and she's famous. So
It's ridiculous. Well, I have a website, and it's SherylJackson.com. So everything about me is on the website.
very
But thank
good.
you, sweetie. This is about you tonight. So thank you guys so much for joining us. And we look forward to getting your feedback and comments. And I'm so proud of you. So I'll call you as soon as we get off the horn.
All right, girl.
All
Love
right.
you. I'm going to pull
Love
you out
you.
just for a moment.
All righty.
Thank you guys so much for coming tonight. I hope this was something that you're able to share with your friends and your families, ladies and gentlemen, of course, but ladies especially. Please, please pay attention to your friends, to your relatives, to anyone who is acting a little bit different. Pay attention to your intuition. Help if you can. If you can't, certainly call the 800 number that I put up earlier. There's somebody that's available to help you in this process, whether you're on the side of the person that is actually going through the abuse, or if you're a person that can help somebody, you're not sure what to do, please reach out to that number and they can, let me see if I can put that back up for you. Certainly give them a call. and they will be able to help you navigate your way through the process. As always, we always want to save a life. Feel free to go to the website. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions, if you want to be a guest on our show, but we certainly are open and available to take your feedback and take your comments. Thank you so much. Love you guys. Bye bye.